questions as we go. Is that
That's
all right?
perfect. I'll probably talk about it too, but you can go ahead and type that in as well. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, I've restarted the recording. I'm going to go ahead and drop off at this time. Best of luck in your session.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kristen. And Beth,
If
I'm
you
just going to
need
let you. I'm going to let you introduce yourself.
I will. And do you see my PowerPoint? Is it being shared?
I do see it. Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
So, without further ado, people are still coming in, and I will admit those people as we go. But Beth, it's all yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm really happy that you have decided to attend my session. I look forward to working with you today. My name is Beth Wheeler. I'm the Director of High School Programs at Front Range Community College, the Boulder County campus. I also have taught English. I specialize in composition, but have taught everything, developmental English and creative writing and literature classes and concurrent enrollment English classes. So my background in metacognition really comes from all of the years of instruction. In addition, I've taught in all modalities, face-to-face, fully online, hybrid, and now we're all experiencing this new mode, which is being called remote learning, but really has to take up online learning space. And so we're all learning about how that's working with our students now. And really my topic couldn't be more timely. I've used metacognition in my own classrooms probably since the very first day, but I know that I've learned a lot about how metacognition, and I'm going to go ahead and use it's the word that the practice that is its counterpart, reflection. Myself, my entire career as a teacher, reflecting on what's working in my classroom and what hasn't. And I have to be honest with you that probably my propensity to reflect so deeply on my practice really inspired my interest in how I could teach students to reflect. And then I started studying how metacognition works as well. So really excited to share with you what I've learned in the 24 years that I've taught. I continue to teach every semester, even though I'm directing a program now as well. And so let's get started. Just so you know, I am going to ask you to participate pretty heavily. You might want to grab, if you don't already have something, a notebook, pen or pencil, open up a document on your computer so that you can type things in. And we will use the chat tool. So when I ask you to participate, and I ask for volunteers, if you'd like to type in your response, that would be so great. Additionally, before we get started, you'll notice that Greg Wells has posted the feedback link in the chat, and so probably that will remain at the top of the chat dialogue or the record of the chat, so we can scroll back up to the top at the end of the session so that you can fill that out. Okay.
Yeah, Beth, I'll go ahead towards the end. I'll post it again as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Greg. All right, so I'm going to keep my PowerPoint in a non-slideshow mode because I intend to document some of the things you tell me in it. So I hope that's okay with everyone and you can see that okay. I can probably zoom in just a little bit so you can see the text a little bit more, and I'll zoom out if I need to. All right, so want to let you know that as I'm presenting to you today, I will also be modeling the way that I would deliver a synchronous session with my own students. So you can take notes on the practices that I'm using with students. And I would always start a session that is going to involve metacognition and reflection, or just one of the two, in this way. That I would let everyone know in the class session, in the synchronous session, what's happening. So that's what I'm doing right now. So we have sort of an agenda for the period, or for the session or the presentation. So I would like to, in a few minutes, talk to you about your goals. I'm really interested in understanding from a few of you why you've chosen to attend this session today. And I understand a lot of people want to learn about metacognition. And so if you can maybe think for a few moments as I'm going through this agenda with you, what your goals are, what you would like to learn from this session specific to your course, specific to your modality, your primary modality, I would say, specific to even an assignment that you're working on with students or want to work on with students in a future course, that would be fantastic. So I've already given you a task. If you want to jot down some thoughts about your goals for attending this session today, something you'd like to learn from the session, and I'll ask for volunteers in just a minute. And I see people already typing in, so that's great. And I'll get to those in just a minute. Thank you. I also want to talk to you, and this will probably be the most lecture-y part of my presentation today. I want to talk to you about the qualities of a course that includes metacognition and reflection. It demands that the student is always thinking about the how and the why of their thinking and their choices. And so want to share what I see in my own classroom that makes metacognition and reflection possible in that space for students. I want to talk to you about the difference between the two terms, the two concepts. Metacognition and reflection can be thought of as different. Some of us don't like to think about them as different. We tend to use the words interchangeably, but they do have some differences, so we'll talk about that. I'd like to, and you know what, I actually think I got my my order of items a little mixed up, so probably this next one applies while I kind of paused. I didn't make a change here. I'm probably going to talk about applying metacognition practice, how that works when we go through the qualities. So probably something I can move up there, and I'll do that in a second. And then I'm going to give you lots of practice. I have 2 activities planned because I want you to both practice with your understanding of metacognition, but then I also want you to apply it as a teacher. So I'm going to put you in both roles today. I'm going to ask you to think about yourself as a student for a little while, and then I'm going to ask you to think about yourself as an instructor or a professor applying this to your course or to an assignment or to an activity in your classroom. And then we'll probably end the session with thinking about how metacognition affects our learning, both what we think we understand about students learning and how practicing metacognition and or reflection can affect their interest, their engagement in a course. But I think I'll probably ask you to reflect on your experience with metacognition in the session too. So that's the goal. We have a lot of material to cover, so we're going to jump right in. And I'm so glad all of you are already posting. And I'm going to apologize up front. We have over 25 participants. Oh gosh, I'm looking at the update. We have 41 participants. So I'm going to randomly scroll and stop and select a few people who've given me their goals. And so if you haven't entered your goals yet, your reason for coming to this session, what you would like to learn from the session, I'm going to stop and say that often when I design a metacognitive question or a reflection question for students, I try to say it in a new way so students who aren't understanding what I'm asking them to think about can think about their answer from a different point of view, with a different way of phrasing. So I will repeat questions many times because I want you to be able to engage with the question that makes the most sense for you. So I scrolled up and I saw, I hope I'm saying it right, Chris Ziska Strange says that, and I'm not sure if Chris is, I don't know Chris's pronouns, so I'm going to just say they for now. Chris says, I want to see how tools can support this for faculty and students. So tools, wants to learn tools. And I am so glad, Chris, that you've mentioned that this is good for both faculty and students. And I've already said, I want to emphasize that my expertise in using metacognition and reflection with my students really comes from my own practices. And of course, I've read many articles and I have many books on the topic, but I do know that my connection with an understanding of these concepts comes from my own practice. So very glad that there are probably other people here as well thinking, I need this for my classroom, but I also do professional development, or I collaborate with or mentor lots of faculty on campus. So definitely you can use any of the things we discussed today, practice today as a group with faculty as well, and part-time instructors. I'm going to use one that I see right below Chris's. Darlene Aguilar has said, metacognition asynchronously. So I would love to have a conversation with all of you about what this looks like in an online class. What tools can we use to support metacognition? And so I want to just say, make a blanket statement that it fits anywhere in a course management system. Anywhere, anywhere, anywhere. I think it just takes sometimes a creative use of some of the learning management tools. So metacognition asynchronously, and give me a second to type asynchronous. It's a long word and don't want to misspell. So that's an awesome one. Let me scroll down a little. I'm going to just randomly stop, and I stopped at Carol G's. Carol says, I want to build intrinsic motivation in my students who want to fully participate in the course through discussions and through accessing all explorations, readings, and videos. I want them to think critically about the content and look for deeper meanings and connections. I want to better understand metacognition. So Carol has many, many goals, but I'm going to put what seems to me to be her most intense focus, that she wants to learn about it more to build intrinsic motivation in her students. And this, I have to say, Carol, is most likely the reason that I started practicing using metacognition in my own classroom. All right, so the first one came from Chris. I apologize. I like to do this too, so that students are feeling valued, that their ideas are being put on the board. I'm forgetting the second person's name. If someone remembers what I said, let me know and type it in. I can type it in a little bit later. Maybe it'll come back to me in a moment. Let's do two more. It's nice to hear everybody's goals. I stopped at Ruth. I hope, Ruth, I get your last name right. Ruth Quirora. Ruth Q says, metacognition plays a huge role in reading comprehension. So I like that very confident statement. I agree that it does. And if it's a goal for others to improve our students' engagement with reading, I know that it is. It's one of those challenges we have every semester, no matter how long we've taught, that students don't engage with reading assignments. And so maybe we can think a little bit more specifically today about emphasizing how metacognition can play a role in encouraging engagement with reading and also reading comprehension. I think that's a great one. Let me do one more. Oh, I saw the person who said it was me that you forgot. Let me go back and find out who that is. So this is the challenge of using the chat tool. For all of us using WebEx, I use WebEx more than Zoom, so I'm a little unfamiliar with it. Darlene, thank you. So I might be a little bit slow with my use of Zoom since I'm using WebEx so much. I like Zoom a lot though. I kind of like the layout a little bit better than WebEx. And one more. Christopher Paul Hauser says, I'm looking for new ways to work with faculty to include reflection. So I'm going to put, Darlene, I think I misspelled your name, so let me see if I can fix that. And I'm going to put couple of X's here to represent, Christopher, that you have a similar goal to Darlene, maybe not asynchronously. Oops, not Darlene's, I apologize, Chris's. You have a similar goal, and let's look for one more different one. But thank you for emphasizing the importance of metacognition in faculty development too. Oh, here's a very specific one, so I'm glad I'm finding this one too. Edith Matesic says that she wants to learn how metacognition can be used in online nursing courses. So I'm really glad this has popped up in my view here. It's really, really important that we all walk away today with some idea for how we can apply metacognition in our specific course, our specific classroom, making it discipline specific. So I'll do my very best to help us to explore some of that today. I'm not going to be able to, of course, go through every discipline that we teach and give you an example, but I have resources to share with you and plenty of ideas. And it's really just about adapting things to a small moment in your teaching and asking students to reflect on that. So that for me is the key. And you'll hear me say that again. Really slowing down the learning process and then picking out very specific parts of the assignment. So breaking things down to their basic elements and then asking students to reflect or think about their thinking related to that very specific experience. So let me get Edith's typed in. That's hard to have a plural on the end of a TH word, Edith. I apologize for that. Learn how, I'm just going to abbreviate, metacognition can be used in nursing. All right, so eventually my nerves will go away and my typing will get better as I'm getting, I'm warming up, and pretty soon I won't even be paying attention anymore to my typing. So awesome. Thank you so much for taking a moment to reflect on your goal and identifying a goal. And so I want to stop and say that every semester when I practice metacognition, first day of class, we've all heard this before, set the mood, set the tone for the course. So if you're going to use metacognition in reflection in your course, you must do this as well. As you're going over your course's learning outcomes, as you're going over the goals for the course, the things that students will learn on that first day, showing everyone the syllabus, the students should be thinking about what their goals are, identifying their own goals. So that's step one, that every semester your students must identify their own learning goals. Because if you don't do that, then you're always going to be sort of forcing your learning goals on them, which is a part of teaching, I think. We're always sort of pressing learning goals on our students through our own lens of what learning looks like and works for us. But finding out from the students what their learning goals are sets the stage for metacognition and reflection. So thank you for participating in that. Really, really important first step. All right, so let's move on to talking. I told you this would be the most lecture-y part of the presentation, so I'm going to talk a lot, and then I'm going to start talking for a little bit and ask you to do some things. I want to give you some ideas about what a course, and I have to be frank here, both ground courses, face-to-face courses, and online courses, what those look like when they use metacognition or reflection. I've taught in all modalities, so it's very easy for me to kind of go back and forth between how I would do something in a face-to-face class and how I would make that show up in an online class. So I'll try to address that for those of you who teach both modalities as well, and for those of you who are really interested in taking some ideas and tools back to your online classes. Okay, so let's get through this. And I know I'm breaking all the rules about text on a PowerPoint slide and all that, but sometimes it just is what we have to do. So first and most important, a classroom that uses metacognition and/or reflection is one that engages students. So this is why there's so much emphasis on active learning, right? That we know when we're asking students to work with our content, applying the content, practicing with it, working problems, whatever the activity is that you've designed, we know already that we're getting students engaged. But what I want to let you know is that when you use metacognition, you actually are engaging students in a much deeper way. They actually become much more interested in what they're doing. There is sort of a qualification to what I just said, though. I have practiced this most of my career, and I can usually engage 85% of the students. they are in. As soon as I start practicing metacognition, they are absolutely engaged because I'm speaking to them. I'm saying, tell me how learning works for you, why it matters to you, show me what you're trying to do when you're practicing this skill that I've just asked you to practice with. So they're completely engaged because I'm speaking to them directly in a lot of ways, because I'm giving them some kind of feedback based on their reflection or their metacognitive analysis of what's happening in their learning. For the other 15%, I find that, and so this sort of addresses one of the one of your goals in the workshop today for some of you. For the other 15%, they just haven't decided that learning is something they're interested in on some level. They just maybe don't know why they're even in college. And I know you've experienced this as an instructor, where you may have asked a student or asked a whole class to reflect on, why are you here? Why are you taking English 121? Or why are you taking, this biology class? Or why have you started in the nursing program in the first course that's required of nursing majors? And when we ask those questions, we find out a lot about what their intrinsic motivation is and what their interests are. And I know that sometimes students are coming to our classrooms because someone has said to them, you need to do this, you should go do that, And so I find that the 15% who can't engage in the class, even with use of metacognition or reflection, are students who simply haven't made their own choice yet about how learning matters in their lives. And so all you can do in those instances is just keep encouraging, of course, but also keep pressing them to use metacognition and reflection. And so I find that I'm able to connect with, I'm using some soft numbers. It changes from class to class, but we always have that one, maybe 3, maybe 5 students. It depends on the semester, right? Depends on the classroom. That feel like this doesn't matter to them. And so I think this is a way to break in with them, and try to make a connection with them about how their learning matters. I have a comment here from Anne-Marie Armstrong. Active revision, great idea, and teaches so much beyond metacognition. Yes, so I'm going to get to that in a minute as well. It's on my PowerPoint. So I wanted just to talk to you for a few minutes about how metacognition and reflection engage students and increase intrinsic motivation. Absolutely. Extrinsic motivation, very, very temporary effect. We know that. Intrinsic motivation is the long-term effect that we can have on students. And that's another reason that I have practiced with metacognition for so many years, is I know that it has a lasting effect, that they take what I've taught them to the next class. Whether it's an English class or not, they are learning how to be more effective learners for themselves. So I really like that, that effect of metacognition and reflection on my students. So what does the classroom look like? You've already heard me say, and I'm going to say it many times, very, very intense focus on small practice. So not the whole concept, but an aspect of it, so that we can really learn the whole concept in a slower pace. I'm going to scaffold a lot, and I'm going to not talk a lot. I'm going to remind them, here's the thing we're practicing today. Remember, this is the concept. Now let's apply it. Lots of application, lots of practice. So practice is great. I have over here in red all caps, I'm not yelling at you. I just wanted to draw your attention to what I thought, sort of the takeaway of each line item is. I want students to feel like when they come to class, they're getting work done. They're practicing with the things that they need to learn. We know how that affects retention. The more students practice and redo and revise and look again. And so lots of small activities, not overly complicated, because the more complicated things are, the harder students will find breaking into understanding how the activity affected them will be. So small, practice. I'm sure some of you have heard about James Lang. I think that's his last name. I'm looking over at I'm in my bedroom giving a presentation. Who knew that would be a part of my life? That I'm gonna have a memory of the time I presented in my bedroom. You've all heard of James Lang's small teaching. It has so many fantastic ideas about breaking down activities to their smallest element and teaching that and practicing with students with that. So workshop feel is really a big part of this kind of classroom. What does that look like in an online class? Does anybody want to type how they into the chat? I mean, I have answers, of course, because I've done this, but I want to help you to practice with this. So I'm going to practice what I preach here. Anybody want to type into the chat how they think a small practice experience or activity might show up in an online class? Where it might show up, how it might show up. So Carol G says, build in activities during exploration. Sure, so build in some small activities, and gosh, they can go anywhere. If you want to make it public, put it on the discussion. If you want to make it public and ensure that students are giving each other some feedback on their practice along the way, discussion's the only way to go, right? Christopher Paul says, yes, discussions, surveys, absolutely. I really want to emphasize, though, that a workshop feel would demand that it's public. So if you could make the survey public in some way, that would be awesome. Interactive media, Christopher Paul Hauser says that as well. And I would also point out that instead of curating materials for your course and showing students what everybody else in the world has created around this topic or this activity or this thing you need students to do, having them create their own interactive media, you know, videos or audio files or whatever. So yeah, lots of great ideas there. Anne-Marie Armstrong says, combine with video presentations, including how and why the video is used. That's a great idea. But so I want to point out that if we're in an online class and we're using a learning management system, not only do you have to think about how this activity will be completed by the students, but where in the learning management system. So I also pick my learning management system tool very carefully. So discussions, you could, of course, set up a group and having students, you know, swap files or swap videos, those kinds of things. I mean, definitely small practice can show up in a quiz, and I can't even see my own video, and I don't really even care at this point. So I'm going to use air quotes, quiz. I use the word quiz with my students because I know it gets their attention. I know they think, oh my gosh, she's testing us on the material. But really, I don't think of a quiz in an online class that way. I want to use that section of my learning management system so that students have a different experience with the learning. And so I often make a small practice quiz, open book, maybe even a group assignment. You know, let students see the quiz and then work in their groups to discuss what the answer could be, or maybe I want them to submit an answer as a group, but small practice is still the focus, okay? So yeah, I can use many different parts of the learning management system to make this workshop feel happen, but probably discussion is where it's going to happen the most and the easiest. And then Carol G said something about short videos, even in a discussion thread, and then extend the discussion, and that's a great idea too. Awesome. Thank you so much for all of those responses. Yeah, that's true, Christopher, ungraded quizzes as well with multiple attempts. That's totally right. And I guess I should stop and say that a lot of times when I'm using quizzes, since I'm an English instructor, I don't have multiple choice answers. I'm usually using a short answer or a short essay answer setup so that students are practicing with their writing, so that I can, you know, reinforce how much writing the students have done in the class as well. All right, so next item, what does it look like in a classroom when metacognition and reflection shows up? There has to be a lot of self-assessment. I'm gonna go ahead and make this risky public statement, I'm being recorded even, that I really don't like peer review in my courses. I use it a little. I find, however, over the years that self-assessment, asking the student to reflect on their own on their own work is much more effective. One, it gives them more practice with metacognition or reflection, whatever I'm asking them to practice with. But I think we all know that peer reviews takes some practice with students. They don't feel like they're the teacher. They don't feel like they have the answers. They don't understand that peer review is sometimes just about giving ideas. So you really have to practice with students to become good peer reviewers. And of course, I try to give them that experience too, but I'm going to practice more self-assessment with students than peer review. So what does that mean for workload? Okay, I do try to balance out how much feedback I'm giving them. It's mostly on me, I have to be honest, but where I want the focus to be instead is, am I giving feedback in writing, or am I giving feedback in an audio file, or am I giving feedback during a synchronous session? Guess where I'm going to try to give most of the feedback? In a synchronous session, so that they hear it as a class and not just one-to-one. And do I give one-on-one feedback? Absolutely. I read a lot of essays. I've probably read, oh my gosh, I don't even want to think about how many essays I've read in 24 years of teaching English. I give lots of feedback in writing, but when I'm using metacognition and reflection in my classroom space, in an online class, some of that feedback is going to be addressed to the whole class. So that can be in synchronous sessions. I can make a screencast-o-matic video and address everything that I saw everyone doing and then ask them to watch that. So that saves me a little bit of time. It's still work, right? It's still part of my workload as a teacher. It saves me a little bit of time. I don't have to go in and type everything. And then Anne-Marie Armstrong points out synchronous allows revision of the feedback as well. Yes, absolutely. So what does it look like when students are practicing metacognition or reflection? They are journaling a lot. So that can show up on a discussion board, right? Some of our learning management systems I know have specific blog or journal tools. I mean, there's so many different platforms out there, so I can't really address all of them. I've mostly used D2L and Blackboard in my career. So you probably know about some other ones that have some other tools you've used, but you know, I'm using this broad word journaling. So some kind of journaling, wherever that would show up in your learning management system. Teaching students how to take notes that are both representative of their ability to summarize what the reading is saying, but also to capture how they're feeling about what they're reading, whether that is a comment about they don't understand it or they're just having sort of an emotional response. I think teaching all of those kinds of note-taking skills are important. And some people like the Cornell notes for that purpose. So you could kind of teach some note-taking along those lines if you wanted to. And then, you know, teaching students how to annotate. I teach with highlighting a lot. In a face-to-face class, I'm going to take a basket of highlighters to class, and I'm going to teach students how to highlight. So many students still read a text, something we've assigned them to read, and they highlight everything. And then you look at it and go, what exactly are you trying to pinpoint for yourself? It's not clear. So teaching students how to annotate through highlighting. I use it in my writing classes. So they can highlight their strengths and weaknesses in their writing. I've used it in quizzes where they can highlight what they think was their best answer, the answer they needed to be more prepared for. So lots of ways to teach self-assessment in a course. That doesn't have to be just reading a text. You know, we're academics, so we always teach from a text, but think about homework assignment problems they've solved, or quizzes or tests where they could highlight and make annotations for themselves as well. So lots of note-taking. I'm looking at some of the chat comments just to incorporate your excellent thoughts as we go. I love that this is more of a conversation feel than just a presentation. So thank you for continuing to put your ideas in here. This is great. Carol G says, I incorporate questions to answer in assignments, asking them how they will apply what they have written in a classroom. And I am teaching teachers, absolutely. So this is probably one of the most important things about teaching metacognition and reflection is application. You must ask students to apply. It's one of the best ways for them to understand what you're asking them to do with a concept, with an idea, with a problem. They must apply. So apply, and then how did that feel, right? Apply, and then how do you think you applied it? Where did it work? Where did it not work as well as you thought? Those kinds of questions, right? Great. Third thing I have under what does it look like in a classroom? Opportunities to revise or improve because of learning from errors. And someone has already pointed out in the chat, yes, revision. So I need to clarify, once again, I teach English, so a revision is implicit in the process that I teach to my students. I really am talking also about allowing students to revise tests, allowing students to revise test questions, quiz questions. And I also know that this is a huge workload issue. Some of you might be thinking, you're crazy, I can't grade that much. Every semester when I sit down to write my new syllabus for the semester, it crosses my mind, Beth, are you really going to grade that portfolio again at the end of the semester? And I always end up telling myself, of course, yes. But what that kind of, I'll just be frank, grading process for me requires is that I allow them to revise essays all semester long. So it is a lot more grading to incorporate revision and a process where students can learn from their errors. What are some of the things I use for students to practice this? I'll mention the highlighters again, asking students to find strengths and weaknesses in their, whatever the assignment is, a quiz, a test, an essay. A short exercise you've asked them to do. It can be used in a small assignment too. It doesn't have to be one of the big benchmark assignments. A students at the whiteboard kind of activity. And I was thinking about synchronous sessions here as I type this because we don't really have a whiteboard in an online class. Some of the, I used to use, I used to use a program called Illuminate Live that had a fantastic whiteboard. WebEx is okay. I don't prefer it to some of the ones that I've used in the past, but some of them have really nice whiteboard features. Asking students to share their work on the whiteboard or show their revision can be done in a synchronous session, whether it's a whole class or just a one-on-one or maybe a small group conference with students. So that's a way to have students practicing revision that is super active and not, and it won't give you something to grade. You can just give feedback as they're showing you what their revision is. So that's a way to cut down on the workload piece. And making revision the idea that they can go back and look at their work and correct it, an active part of the class, something that they do every week, every class period. And I'm thinking about your synchronous class period or your face-to-face meeting on campus. Yeah, I know Christopher Paul is saying this is a really hard sell to allow the retaking of tests. I know that that's true, but when I make a choice for my own classroom and my own relationship with students, I am the teacher modeling how I learn. I'm going to choose, even to my own detriment, the thing that is best for them. And I know that's a hard sell. And I know that it's hard to make time for all of that kind of grading. But I think if we try to find ways where maybe through a synchronous session, you can talk students through the revision, then that maybe can help a little bit with the workload issue that I know a lot of instructors think about when that is mentioned. I just want to emphasize that without relearning, without looking again, without the option to revise, metacognition and reflection doesn't really, what word do I want to use here? It doesn't really come across as authentic to students, I would say, because they're not being given the opportunity to apply their new understanding of, oh, I thought through my logic in that answer, and now I see where it broke down. And now I see where I can try it again and get it closer to the right answer, or to the right answer, or whatever, you know, whatever the situation is. So without the ability to actually revise, I don't think metacognition and reflection rings true for students. So that's why it's in my list. Coming to the end of this talky part of the presentation, you want to always focus on where accountability and learning lies in your course, and it has to be on the student. So that's why we started today with your goals. That's why I'm going to start day one with student goals. I actually, many semesters, add the student goals into the syllabus. So I'll say, okay, so you'll see before the next class period, or you'll see, you know, in 2 days that I will have added your student goals to the syllabus so that they see that it's an important part of the course. Asking them often to tell their plans. What's your plan for revision in this essay? What's your plan for studying for that test? That would be especially effective after a test review session that you've held with the students, whatever that test review session looks like in your online class. Now you tell me your plans for studying. Next steps, those kinds of questions are very, very helpful in letting students learn how to take accountability. Not all students know how, so giving them the practice to do that is essential. All right, and then I'm going to just highlight with my cursor, if my computer will work. Yes, I'm at this last section here. I wanted to just make a quick list of things that I know I have practiced with students that embed metacognition and reflection in my classroom. Starting the class with an opening or essential question. Designing an essential question for your syllabus, and then, you know, using lots of other questions to help answer that essential question over the course of the semester. Reading checks, whatever your reading check looks like. I'm forgetting who said it now. I'm sorry, I'm not remembering everyone's names, but one of our participants shared the very, very important fact that metacognition helps with reading comprehension. So how I practice reading checks is I usually ask students to do some kind of journal on a discussion board, or maybe I have a private journal set up for them in our learning management system. But during a synchronous session, which I am using with my English students right now, even the ones where we've transitioned to remote learning, I dislike the feeling I have when I have to not allow all students to participate in a class. And what I'm saying is I'm going to design an activity with the reading that demands that all students engage with the text. And so you can do a reading check that demonstrates that they've read it and comprehend the content of the reading. But I'm also going to ask them to apply something we've practiced in some way with the readings that they can do during class time. So I do have short synchronous sessions, and I do ask students to engage with the text that was assigned in a way that's different from just summarizing. Reading check, I see your question, Sophia. Reading check would be, I need to make an assignment that helps me to see how not just how, but if the student has read the assignment. And so a lot of instructors do short quizzes or, you know, question and answer at the beginning of class, discussion to see, yeah, so some kind of formative assessment. Yep, absolutely. But that's what a reading check would be. And we can talk about classroom assessment techniques. They're absolutely perfect for using metacognition and reflection in the classroom. I sort of have designed this activity not thinking about, you know, assessment, even though that's what it is, right? It's a way to assess student learning and helping them to learn how to assess their own learning. But I wanted to kind of to keep it in the context of just really great classroom practice, not only assessment. yeah, I definitely think a reading check can be done with a classroom assessment technique or something like that. You know, quizzing, we've talked about quizzes already today. I don't use the word quiz to mean I'm testing your comprehension and your retention of information. I actually think of a quiz as another opportunity to practice with the content. I want you to practice once again. So I use the word in a way that sort of puts pressure on students to take it more seriously, perhaps. We all know that we need to space out steps and due dates. So you've already heard me talking a lot about slowing the process down, slowing the steps of the assignment down so that they can see how it builds to this larger understanding. I love this idea. I do it every week, and I know my students seem to get frustrated, but I open the syllabus every week. Even in my synchronous sessions, I open the syllabus and remind them. So this is the thing I said on the first day of classes that we would be learning, and here it is, here's the learning outcome. And then I break that down and talk to them about it in simpler terms. And then we have an activity so they can see how it works, right? I want to always help students to see that the syllabus has been the guide from the very beginning. I think it teaches students how to go back to the essential, what am I supposed to be learning here? And how do I do that for myself as a learner? If I have this goal, how do I check back to see what my progress on that goal is? And so those kinds of things I'm modeling for students along the way. So align your practice and then small learning activities with assessment, absolutely. We're already talking now about formative and summative assessment. The kinds of activities we design can be aligned with assessment practices, absolutely, and should be. I think it helps us to structure our teaching when we think of it in those terms, to practice with students in class aligned with assessment. If that helps you to think of scaffolding learning in that way, then absolutely do that. Practicing predictions. You know, I talk a lot from the English context because that's what I teach, but this could be used in any assignment. Looking at a paragraph in an essay and asking students to predict how that will affect a reader. Asking a student to look at a test question and predicting how the teacher is going to grade it. I mean, those are the kinds of things that make students stop and say, wait a minute, I'm actually responsible for what I'm turning in here, right? I'm actually responsible for the effect that it has on the person who will be looking at my work. So those are really important predictions. And then one way you haven't talked a whole lot about, you know, emotions in learning. Gosh, I want to check in with my students every once in a while. How's it feeling? I have how are you feeling about this? How are you feeling about that assignment? But I've started every synchronous session since we've all gone remote and we've all been, you know, under stay-at-home orders because of COVID-19. I've started every class session with just I don't even know what to call it. I've allowed students to vent. I've allowed students to process their emotions, to write down how they're feeling about what's happening to them. So checking in on attitudes and emotions is really an important part too. Checking in to feel the pulse of the class. You've heard that phrase many times, but it's really what you're doing is checking in on how they're feeling about things. And I have to say the last 2 class sessions have been much more productive after we talked through those feelings, reactions to what's happening to all of us. People shared, students shared, and then we got down to work and they were able to focus. And so I want to talk about checking in on attitudes in a different way too. If you don't mind, I'm almost done with this lecture-y part. On a test, on a high stakes assignment, allowing students to start that test with questions that ask about any testing anxiety they have, any uncertainty they have about certain concepts, and letting them get that out of their system, out of their head so they can focus, I think is a really helpful thing. And then the last thing on my PowerPoint here is modeling. I model that I'm a learner. First and foremost, I model that I'm a learner to my students so they can take whatever they see me modeling and use for themselves. We're not all the same. This student over here in my classroom isn't going to learn the same way that I do. The student online with me in a synchronous session isn't going to learn exactly the same way I do. But I'm going to model and I'm going to talk through my choices about why I choose to learn this way or that way, what works for me, what hasn't worked for me, what I know my strengths are, where I know I have weaknesses. Imagine the impact you have on students when you are being vulnerable to learning in that way. It gives them permission to do that too. And I think it's a really good idea to model that. So I'm talking a lot to you right now because I'm hoping that you see, as a teacher, these are some of the things that I use, but I've also learned them along the way, trying to give as much narrative around that as I can, as many examples as I can. So I'm going to pause and ask if you have any questions. I see so many great comments. There's a lot of comments, so it's going to be hard for me to address all of them. So thank you so much for adding them. But any questions, anything you'd like me to clarify?
Hey, Beth, this is Greg. I just want to, sorry to interrupt, but just wanted to give you a little bit of a time. So we got roughly about 30 minutes left.
Yes, thank you.
For the participants, I'll be posting the link to our survey in the chat session. So off to you again.
Thank you. So I don't see any questions, and thank you again for all the comments. So I'm going to let you look very quickly at the definition. I told you we would look at the difference between reflection and metacognition, just so you have an understanding of how they operate separately. And I was going to do an activity with this, but based on the time, I think we'll skip to a different activity. So very quickly, Naomi Silver pointed out in an essay she wrote called The Reflective Pedagogies and the Metacognitive Turn in College Teaching, that reflection is often defined as a conscious exploration of one's own experiences. So that's where, you know, emotion and feelings about, you know, how learning is working, feelings, the baggage they bring to class about learning to begin with, like all of that stuff is happening in reflection. And then metacognition is different in that it's the act of thinking about one's own thought process, the steps to a process, for instance, or using logic, or using reason, all those kinds of things, critical thinking. I think choice goes here as well. You know, why I made a choice to do this over that. So super, super important to understand the difference. But I want you to know that I often just synthesize the two. I have a hard time as a learner myself separating how I feel about it from thinking about it. Not everyone is like me, however, so you might decide to be very, very intentional in class about distinguishing the two, or you might explain to your students that you are, you know, synthesizing those two ways of thinking about our learning together. I was going to do an activity where I asked you to define it for your own self and for your class. And so want to let you know that that's something you might consider doing after, since we're not going to have time for that today. But let's go to another activity. I'm super excited for this one. All right, so I have found 3 online articles. You probably can Google search the titles with quotation marks around the words, and we'll find the sources. So I would like to preview them for you. I think previewing is also a helpful thing for students who are learning how to be metacognitive and reflective in their learning process. And so I preview things a lot. The Metacognition and Student Learning article is a Chronicle for Higher Education article and is more of an essay format and talks about how students who have poor assessment of their own skills, poor, not strong abilities to master the content they've come to your classroom to learn, need metacognition the most. So if that sounds interesting to you, please find that article. The second article, not really an article, is Metacognition Center for Teaching. Oh, sorry. here's the Google search you should do. Just do Metacognition and Vanderbilt, and this Center for Teaching website should come up. You have the link as well. But the second one is, I want to say, probably the most general of all the readings, but I think there's some good definitions in there. And then the third one is more of a list of ideas. You can Google search activities for metacognition. This is on the DePaul website, and it gives a list of ideas for embedding metacognition in your class. So I'll give you 1 minute to decide and go find the article. And if you're having trouble finding the Vanderbilt one, let me know. Again, I'm going to put in the in the chat that I Googled these words, metacognition and Vanderbilt. I love Vanderbilt Center for Teaching website. I use it a lot. So that's for that middle one. So you can pull this up on your phone. If you're on a laptop, you can open another app and a browser and go find it. If you have an iPad lying around or another kind of tablet, you could look this up. So here's what I'd like you to do. I'm going to give you not very much time. Let's do 5 minutes to read quickly or skim the beginning. And I want you to, as quickly as you can, latch on to something that you see in the article, and I want you to apply it to your classroom. I want you, in other words, to find something very quickly in the article. Yep, I'll put the links in the chat. Great idea, Carol. Thank you. It's often hard to do presentation and, the teacherly stuff. So there's essay 1, the Chronicle for Higher Education. There's the more general presentation on metacognition in the classroom. And this one has a list of ideas, which is really, really great. All right, so your goal, read through quickly, latch on to something, isolate something in the text that you find interesting and can apply to your classroom. And I want you to be able to share that in the chat. What you found, what is it? You can summarize it or quote it, whatever you want to do. And then how would that show up in your classroom? So 4.5 minutes to do that starting now. And I'm doing the work with you. I'm going to go on my phone. All right, I see people starting to type stuff in. You'll see that I've added align to my PowerPoint. No, I didn't want to do that with my font. So I'm trying to highlight this for you. I'll put it in bold. Please type your find from the website. You can summarize it if you'd like, quote it if you'd like, and then tell us how you would apply that into your classroom. I wish I had a way of letting you all share these ideas. I want to ask our session moderator if there's a way for us to get a copy of the chat that we can have as a document. So maybe we could send that out to participants along with the PowerPoint, because there are going to be a lot of great ideas in there.
Beth, that is an excellent question. Let me, while you're still teaching our session here, let me reach out to my teammates and see if that's an option. I'll be back with you.
Awesome, thank you. So I will do what I did at the beginning of class and maybe go highlight a couple. We only have about 20 minutes left, and I do want to leave at least 5 minutes for you to go and do the feedback on the session. But imagine we were in a synchronous session, and I'm your instructor and you're the student. I'm kind of putting you in the student role right now, as I told you I would at the beginning of the session. And how this has forced you, pushed you to learn on your own a little bit. And I probably would ask you to do some kind of reflection afterward as well. But this application piece is really, really crucial. All right, so we're at the 4-minute mark. So I want to encourage you, if you didn't get to finish this, because I know I've done this quickly, but 2 things I want to say. For those of you who think, oh my gosh, I can't fit metacognition in along with course content, honestly, it can happen this fast. Those of you that know classroom assessment techniques, I saw someone typing up muddiest point up on the chat a little while ago. You can go find that Cross and Angelo classroom assessment techniques book, open to any page in the book, and probably find something you could adapt for your classroom, and they can happen really fast. Asking students just to type in something really quickly into a chat or into a discussion board, or to share in a synchronous session with audio is getting metacognition and reflection into your teaching and into their learning process. Absolutely. So let me scroll up and see if I can find one. Well, Anne-Marie says, I picked 2 activities from the DePaul website, photo captioning with the first one, or 2 that everyone captions and then have students post their own photo and peers caption. So beautiful. Idea, application, and now you have something you could try in the next week or so as you're doing remote learning with your students. And you can, again, add another layer to it where you ask them to reflect on what was doing this assignment like, or why did you choose this over that, or if you were going to do it again, how would you change what you did? You know, those kinds of questions as follow-ups help them to practice with metacognition and or reflection, however you phrase the question. And I shared mine down here. I found this on DePaul as well, evaluate and revise their own work. Ask students to highlight sections in their assignment. This is something we've already talked about today, and have them provide comments so we have insight into what they've highlighted. Why was that a strength? Why was that an area of improvement? What did you have to do to make the change, or what's your plan for making the change? Very simple metacognition and reflection around the assignment, around the task. All right, so I've had you practice being a student. Now I want you to think about how this can work with your teaching. Those of you who identify that you want to help other instructors use metacognition and reflection in their own teaching practice, this is something you could do. Very, very simple. So what I'd like you to do is to think about one small assignment, maybe one question, maybe one part of an activity that students have completed in the past week. This week, right now, something they've learned. I'm assuming all of you are in the classroom right now, so if you're not, think about a previous semester. Something small, okay? An assignment that students, a small part of an assignment that students have completed this week in your course, and I want you to reflect on its strengths, the areas of improvement for that learning experience students had, and what you'd like to try next time. And again, would love it if you would like to share in the chat. If you wouldn't like to share, maybe just jotting it down on your paper or thinking in your head. But I'll go ahead and do my own teacher reflection.
Hey, Beth, sorry to interrupt you again.
No problem.
There is a way to save the chat. Not exactly sure what that looks like, but there is a way to do it. And would you like me to send that to you through email?
Yes, that would be great.
Okay, we'll figure it out.
Perfect. So I see Edith has something up in the chat that I'll read out. I know you all can see it, but I like to share examples in class because again, it's modeling people's learning, not just my own. So I'm giving some variety on that. I think Edith's comment was related to the last activity on what she saw on the website, but I'll go ahead and read it anyway because it gives an idea. DePaul had something about figurative transformation, showcasing self-development, personal growth, and articulating goals, describing how the course prepares them for future educational and professional experiences and thinking creatively. Yes, and I usually use those kinds of concepts throughout the course in smaller assignments, and then students in my class, and this is something that all instructors and professors can do, asking students to reflect on all of these moments where metacognition and reflection was practice in the course in some way at the end of the semester. So let me give you a quick idea that you could try to isolate the metacognition and reflection in a specific area in your learning management system. You know, a specific discussion board forum or a specific private journal or something like that. So you could isolate it that way. It's hard for me to do that. I like for students to be practicing it throughout in all essays and in all quizzes and in all, you know, class conversations, whether that's discussion board or an actual face-to-face talk in class. So I just try to keep a list in my own teaching journal of all the places where this metacognition and reflection has happened. And I give an assignment at the end of the semester where I ask students to go back and look at quiz number 2. You'll remember question number 5 asked you to reflect on blah, 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 right? And so I give them an opportunity to go through and look at all these places where metacognition and reflection has happened, and then give them a culminating experience with all of it, some kind of letter to themselves, letter to you, some kind of reflection. So I think that's a way you can make all of the work important. Someone just made a comment about she appreciates the activities, but she can't practice with all of the talking, etc. And I totally appreciate that, and thank you for sharing that feedback. I really want people to practice with metacognition and reflection as much as possible, even if it's in this really quick way, and in this place where we're, you know, you're constantly hearing a voice talking. So I appreciate your vulnerability to share that, and you know, and apologize that you weren't able to do it right now, but I hope you'll try to practice with it later on, you know, with the assignments where so you can go and find those articles and think more. And then I'll go ahead and type my email if you would like to talk with me about your specific class. You know, the challenge in a presentation like this is I can't address your specific concern necessarily. I have to present somewhat generally. So feel free to reach out to me. We could definitely schedule a WebEx or a phone conversation. I'd be happy to talk to you about your specific course and ideas that you have. So thank you so much. I do want to see if there are a couple more ideas I can share. Kathy Duho, I think I'm saying that right, I hope, is the one who shared about the not being able to hear and think. Let's see. Carol G says tools, Jumpstart Journal, Think, Pair, Share, What Now, Fishbowl, Press Pass, yes, or Ball Pass, all of these, I'm sorry, Ball Press, all of these names for activities we've done, absolutely. These are good ideas. They watched a video about bullying for a discussion. I added a video clip, a world without hate. I think that I would like to email them and about how the assignment made them think. Yes, the follow-up piece is crucial. So Carol's giving like all these things she's done with her students, but this is the metacognitive or the reflective piece, right? A follow-up email. Tell me how the assignment made you think and what did you take away from the discussion, right? So those kinds of reach out to the student, but you can make those assignments is what I'm saying. You can make it a part of the assignment where they have to email you after the assignment is done to tell you what they thought about it. And I really want to emphasize Carol's really smart choice here. Sometimes students don't like reflecting, thinking about their thinking in front of others. So doing it in a private space, like an email or a private journal in your learning management system, in a quiz, you're only seeing the quiz, is creating safety for the student who's not comfortable with doing it. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and thank you for coming to the session. I think if you have questions, please type them into the chat tool, especially if you have a specific question about your course. I'll try to answer as many of them as I can. And then you have 9 minutes to use the link to give feedback on the session. Thank you, Anne-Marie. I'm so grateful for your attendance today. I have references to sources if you are interested in knowing where I've gotten any of my ideas over the years. So please feel free to ask questions in the chat.
Beth, this is Greg again.
Yes.
Do you happen to have a link to the slides that you've presented today?
I sent the slides into Brandon, so he has a copy of the slides.
Okay.
But I'll probably send them again since I actually have some session content in them that I didn't have at the beginning, right?
Okay, yeah, that'd be great.
Thank you, Carol. Yes, Emery, you have my email. Thank you. Thank you, Maria. Have an excellent Friday. Greg, go ahead.
Beth, we just wanted to thank you for the presentation today and joining us here in this virtual conference. We've been working hard for everything to work correctly, and so far so good. So we really appreciate your interest in the conference and the opportunity to present this topic.
Thank you, Greg. I enjoyed my time. It was very nice.
Good.
Thank you, Brian.
And to our participants, we hope that you continue your participation in the conference. This is our final day, and we'd love to have you join as many sessions as possible. That includes you as well, Beth. So I think with that, we're going to go ahead and end the session so we can have time to prepare for the next one. And Beth, thank you again. It's been a pleasure listening to your presentation today.
Thanks, Greg. Have a nice weekend.
You as well. Thank you.